Oh, 1054. Oh, 1055. Oh, hey. Welcome to Taylor's trick-taking table. Ooh, and the gun show, really. Look at this. Whew! That's some tone, cheese string arms. But I am not just a beautiful body. I'm also a beautiful mind. Smart mind. Anyway, today, this is a good segue, actually, because we're talking about game footprint and box sizes. And I've noticed, these are honker-like miniature games, right? So the giant box sizes make sense. But I've noticed in a lot of trick-taking games, people prefer, and I think rightfully so, a smaller box, a super small footprint. I know Japanese games have almost like tuck boxes all the time, usually, or just box sizes that can fit, 2 decks of cards. But they do a great job of keeping the game and there's just that deck of cards as tightly compact as possible. In the past, I've noticed older games didn't really fit this trend. I know I have a game called Thunder here, where, okay size box, pretty large, but I mean, if the components in there justify it, sure. But once you remove the rule book, as you can see, comically little amount going on in this box. So it's interesting that I think trick-taking boxes are expected to be small because they're almost expected to be a small experience or kind of a filler that people might want to play, in between bigger games or at the start of a game night or intros. It's kind of interesting just noticing that most of the time trick-takers are in small boxes and expected to be that way. Why I bring this up, all this rambling, because it's Japaria, so area control trick-taking games. We're covering the game Joraku. It's by Iori Tsukinami, and the interesting thing about this is I have 2 editions where even though one is about half the size, they have the exact same components. So same cards, same cubes, but the board in this one is just broken up and kind of shrunken to fit this smaller package, whereas this one is kind of a big fold-out board. It's interesting. I think both make sense. I don't even think this is like too big of a package, really. But I could totally see the argument that if you have a trick-taking game, maybe make it as small as possible. Maybe most people who think this way think all games should be as small as possible. But I have just noticed that I think trick-taking games generally want to be taking up as little footprint on the shelf as possible. I wonder why that is. I don't know. Just kind of a fun rumination. Back to the subject at hand, Joraku. The hook to Joraku is, again, it's an area control trick-taking game. And this one has an interesting arc, though, where the areas at the start of the game are less valuable at the end of the game. So they kind of get weaker and weaker as the game goes on, but the areas that are weak get stronger as the game goes on. And the stronger they get later they're further to the right. So there's an interesting kind of migration. So it's area control, but it's also like a lot of, I don't even think this is a mechanism, but like area movement. There's a kind of an interesting kind of flow and push in the game. I think I'm kind of butchering it, but let's go to the table and I'll show you how to play. The deck in Joraku is made up of 3 suits numbered kind of 0 to 6. Technically 1 to 6, but there's a ninja card which does special things. Here we have the game mostly set up for 3 players. So each player at 3 is going to be dealt 6 cards, so there's 3 cut aside. They're going to put one of their markers on the score track, and then, to finish part of setup, there's a 1 through 6 of these cards that represent the areas up here on the board. These will be shuffled and dealt out to the players. And what they'll do is they'll place their kind of captain marker on the corresponding spot. So this has 5 here. They'll place theirs on the 5. This one over here has 2, and this one has 3. And then in addition to that, the marker that kind of dictates the person who will then lead to the trick will go to the person who placed theirs in the highest spot. So this will go to the red Japan flag player. Then you'll just collect these, get them out of the way. All they'll do is set up the start of the game, and then you're ready to play with the lead player being the person holding that card. How you win Joraku is after 3 rounds you have the most points. You get points by controlling areas at the end of each round, but also winning tricks in between. Jumping into the gameplay, so the start player is the Japanese flag. Say they lead a red 4. After a player plays a card, then they resolve the card, and there's different ways to resolve. One of them is you can place up to 3 of your cubes in the corresponding area to the rank of the card. So there's the 4 area. This was a 4 card. So maybe the Japan flag decides to place 2 of their cubes in the 4 area. We'll cover other things you can do with your card in a little bit. But it's a must-follow game, meaning this green stabby player needs to play one of their reds. So maybe they decide to play the 3, and they place one of their cubes in the 3 area. Finally, coming to Doodle Bob here, they only have 1 red, so they have to play that red. So again, they can just place, if they want to, in the 5, and you can do other stuff with your actions, but just to keep it simple, we're going to cover that one case. So they all did the same resolve action for now. Then you see whoever played the highest number regardless of suit. So in this case, they were all the same suit, but the 5 would win. They would take this card, meaning they're going to lead to the next trick. In addition to leading the next trick, what this card also means is, because there's a chart down on the bottom here, is you immediately check where your captain token is, the Daimo, I think. I don't know how to pronounce it. But so Doodle Bob won, so they are blue. They'll check their captain spot. If they are first, they'll get the first points right away, so 3. Second, they get 2, and third, they get 1. So that's part of the area control of the game. And as you can see, the area control works where you count the number of squares you have, that's 1 strength, and then your Daimo is 2 strength. So over here, they had 2 and no one else had any, so they would get 3 points immediately. So just move the blue up 3 points. Again, if it was like this, and they were actually second place, they would have only gotten, as you can see, 2 points. Oop, as you can now see, 2 points. Starting with the next trick, maybe Doodle Bob leads the 5 blue, and now we can cover maybe the other things that you can do with these cards. What we did in the past was we would just place out onto the board with the same region, but you don't always have to do that. You can actually use this as a number of action points to use on the board. So the various things you can do with action points are on this helpful player card. So you can move tokens around. That's the middle one here. You can move one of your samurai tokens to an adjacent area. So maybe they have 5 of them, right? So if it only costs 1, maybe they move this samurai over to there. Or you can spend 2 action points to move your Daimo to an adjacent area. So maybe they move over here for 2. So now they have 2 left. The other thing you can do is for 1 action point, you can kill an opposing player's samurai in the area where your Daimo is. So maybe they spend 1 action point to kill that one. And then maybe their last action point, they just move their last blue over to there. So now they have control of the 3. So those are the different ways that you can use your card. So like as a bunch of action points, or as just a place where you can put 1, 2, 3 of your samurai tokens straight into that area. So then coming over to Japan flag, they don't have any of the blue cards, so maybe they decide to play a 6 because they would be winning because it's highest number. So again, they can place 1, 2, or 3 in the 6 region, or they can do 6 actions. So maybe they kill this player, move twice, kill that player for a total of 6. Coming to the final player here, so they could play their 2 or their 3 because it's blue, but they could also follow suit with a ninja, and we haven't covered what ninjas do. So what ninjas do is usually they'll lose the trick unless there is a 6 played. So if there's a 6 played, like in this situation, they'll actually win. They'll get the points from that. And how you resolve ninjas is because, as you can see, there's no rank on there, so you don't have any like action points to spend, is they allow you to place 1, 2, or 3 of your samurai tokens in any region you want, including, as you can see over here, the final region, which doesn't have any numbers, so it's kind of like a special way to be able to place tokens right to the final place. And why I say final place is because, let's say we fast forward after we do all the tricks. This is maybe how the game could look. That's better. So let's say this is actually how it looked at the end of the round. So you would just go through all the areas, and depending on what round you're on, you would see who got first, second, and third in the area control, and you would give that many points. So let's just lift this up here to give a good example. If we were scoring the 6th one here, so first place would get 7, then second place 4, and then third place 2 in this incredibly blurry picture. There we go. But so how it works is you'll count up how many tokens. So red got first, blue got second. So red would get 7 points, blue would get 4. If there's a tie, you would just bump both players down. So say if people tied for first, the tied players would get 4, and they'd bump the second place down to third and third place off. So as you can see here, in the first round, at the end of the first round, this is worth a ton of points, but as it goes to second and third, it's actually not worth anything. That's funny because as you can see, it changes where the ones later on down here are actually worth more points. So like the final ones here, maybe not worth much at the first round, but worth a ton of points at the end. So players will be marching and moving all their units closer to Kyoto as the game progresses all the way through the third round. There's some caveat rules like if the same number is the highest when played in the trick taking, the later one wins, but those are all minutia, and that's essentially how to play the game. So that is Joraku, and I enjoy this game quite a lot. There's something to the simplicity of how it implements the area control that is just so pure. I know we're going to do a fair amount more of area control and trick-taking games this month, so I thought it'd be nice to start off with one that kind of does it the most typical way. So you can kind of do area control or kind of area majority in different ways. We've done a video on Cat in the Box, which is kind of funny because a lot of people call Cat in the Box area majority, when in reality you're kind of picking certain spots on a board, or like Les Plateaux where you're also picking spots on the board. And I don't quite know what people's definition of area majority is or area control is, but in this one I feel like this is like the classic kind of example of area control, kind of El Grande, where you think of, you just compare the number of units you have to the other people, and that is just who controls the area. There's something to that very like pure idea of the mechanism that is easy to teach and kind of easy to grasp. And the way it's used and balanced in this game is very interesting. I know it's already been said before. I watched Z Garcia's review on this, but there's a cool push and pull of like high number cards being useful for actions, but also being bad at late game where you want to just put troops on the board. Whereas low cards being good at being able to put closer to Kyoto, but also having fewer actions. I do like that it's must follow. There's something that, since you don't have too big of a hand, you can kind of short suit, and since you're passing 2 cards, you can short suit even easier. That allows you to not be restricted too much by the must follow, but it kind of definitely clears up some of the analysis paralysis and like options and choices to the players in a nice way. Something that stood out to me in this game, and maybe this is just coming from a perspective of someone who's currently trying to make a trick-taking game, where you can see game design elements added or kind of tweaked to the desired effect. And what I mean by that is it's interesting how there's that card that gives points right away to the person who won the trick, as opposed to just worrying about the area control at the very end of those 3 rounds. And you can tell that maybe the person was like designing the game and they realized, oh, if we just have the end round scoring and that's just it, I think it might be a little too brutal. And so maybe their solution for that was to have each trick give points right away. And I think it's a nice system. It's not too, fiddly or like obtuse, but it's kind of interesting to see in the design space maybe somewhere that didn't fit what the designer wanted and how they remedied that. Maybe a more simple example is maybe they wanted more short suiting, and so they have passing cards, and the choice to pass 2 cards, which is a fair amount when the hands are somewhat small, is really interesting to me. I love how trick-taking has so many levers and kind of knobs to twist on your design. Like, how do you want following suit? How do you want passing? How do you want points doled out? All these things, like, you can get into such minutia and tweak just the smallest amount, and the game can feel so different. Trick-taking has a funny design space where the smallest ripple kind of spreads throughout the entire game. It can change the entire feeling. And this just came across so much in this game, especially when, the points on the bottom of the areas could be wildly different compared to, which round they're in, or even just right next to each other. Moving over one space could be 3 more points. It's cool to use this game as just like an interesting example in how to design a trick taker. last point to this, because this might not be interesting to everyone, but I noticed in the game there are variant rules. And I've talked to some trick-taking designers about this idea of how do you want your game to come across? Do you want there to be a standard way to play? Do you want there to be an advanced way to play? What's the version of your game that you want most people to experience and have in their mind like, oh, I've played this game? And it's interesting to look through, because there's 6. It's kind of a fair amount of variant rules for the game. And some of them are just like super basic, like it just changes the point value for if you want a trick. And not by too much, but just enough to make it be pretty different. Again, a variant. And it's interesting to see that and just think, I'm sure they playtested all these different editions of the game, and they felt like, you know, this is a fun edition, but maybe not what I envision the game to be, but I still want players to sometimes play it if they want that spice or that different variance in the gameplay. I'm rambling now about design, which isn't maybe the most interesting thing. Or maybe it is. But it was just cool to see how a designer handles maybe liking their game in a lot of different states and wanting to show that variance to the players. And I think this is a clever way to do it. And to reiterate a point, I think this game has really solidified the fact that I love trick takers that value high and low cards. It's almost I don't want to say the wrong phrase. I don't think it's rite of passage. That doesn't make any sense. It's almost just like a marker of a very interesting trick taker to me, to give those choices to the players where after the random deal, you're not just like messed over. Classic games like American Bookshop or whatever do this super well. But in here, it was probably one of the more balanced ways I've seen. And it stood out as just like really well considered. So that is Joraku. And again, this is kind of like the classic area control trick-taking game. We covered Brian Boru in the past, and that had lighter trick-taking elements. This one definitely feels like a trick-taker. I would say that the area control and trick-taking are pretty balanced. I don't know if I had to pick which one was stronger. It'd probably be area control just because that's where a lot of the points come from. But also, if you win a trick, you get points. So there's a pretty good balance of which mechanism kind of is at the forefront. And I don't foresee this mix, if you do like both trick-taking and area control, ever letting someone down. So definitely check this out, and thanks so much for watching.